Greetings. My name is Guy Dauncey, and I'm speaking to you from the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw and Shtoominis First Nations near Ladysmith on Vancouver Island. Our work this afternoon is to organize this event is personal and voluntary, inspired by the urgency of the time we live in. We're not backed by any organization. My colleagues in organizing this launch are Deb Morrison and Heather Bates. Deb is a learning scientist in climate justice and equity and science education at the University of Washington, a North Pender Island trustee, and she's playing an active role with the Joe Biden Climate Action Team. And I'll now hand over to Heather.
Hi, I'm Heather Bates. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I've been involved in climate work for about 2 years. I'm speaking to you from Nanaimo on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. We're gathering today from all across the province, and so we'd like to take a moment to recognize that Indigenous peoples have lived in these lands since time immemorial. As a result of colonialism, Indigenous peoples have experienced violence, cultural erasure, and forcible removal from their ancestral territories, resulting in intergenerational traumas of many kinds. These systemic injustices continue for many Indigenous peoples within BC. BC's Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act was passed just over a year ago. Progress has been painfully slow. Recent bills to amend laws in BC have been tabled with no prior consultation with First Nations. This is clearly not in line with the concept of free, prior, and informed consent of First Nations before adopting and implementing legislation. Injunctions continue to be used to forcibly remove Indigenous people from their lands. In solidarity with the Indigenous nations and communities of these lands, we acknowledge that Indigenous peoples have the right to free, prior, and informed consent on all aspects of human activity within their ancestral territories. While we seek guidance in our climate work from many who are part of Indigenous nations and communities, it's their right to participate or not in this effort. We make an agreement to respect principles of reciprocity and relationality in this work as we endeavor to develop lasting partnerships that may foster a more just future guided by equitable decision-making processes. Racism in BC is not limited to Indigenous peoples. For example, Chinese Canadians were denied the right to buy, lease, or preempt Crown land in BC for decades. Land titles excluded Indigenous, Black, and people of color from living in certain areas. If anyone who's joining can mute themselves. British Columbians with Japanese heritage were forced into internment camps during the Second World War, and their properties were auctioned off without compensation. Today, the vast majority of people identifying as visible minorities in BC report experiencing prejudice or discrimination when surveyed. So we affirm the need for ourselves, our government, our communities, and our institutions to center those among us who are most vulnerable and marginalized, so that we may reimagine our social structures with justice as a core principle. So next up, I'm pleased to introduce Geraldine Manson, who is a member of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. She's married to Earl Manson, and she has 3 children, 7 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild. Geraldine has worked for her community for many years, giving credit to her elders, both present and those who have passed on. She is the Elders Coordinator and Cultural Advisor for Snuneymuxw First Nation and Elder in Residence at Vancouver Island University. Please go ahead, Geraldine.
RCMCIA. I Quincy Lamtala. I Zappa Quinzalupskagi on a quail. Eats 2 ESR. Antapat Satasia. Snuneymuxw. E Kunitam Sna. Geraldine Manson. Good afternoon, everyone. My traditional name is Satasia from Snuneymuxw, and Elder in Residence with BIU. It is an honor and with great respect that I welcome you to this occasion of gathering and speaking on this topic that has been ongoing for many few years now. And I think as we move forward on it, some of the obstacles along the way has been cleared, and yet we still have a long ways to go. From the mountains to the rivers to the ocean and all its resources of each area, the old people say, it's important to understand why we are at the forefront, being the caretaker, the stewardship of the land, and understanding why we are there protecting each of those areas. And understanding what is climate change? What is the importance of the environment in those areas? And I raise my hands to all those who have come to talk, to share, and understand, and weave the conversations going away and continuing, adding to the work that you're doing in the areas of your expertise, your knowledge, and using it and bringing in the younger generation to understand why it's important to have them at the forefront with you, mentoring them along the way. So thank you for coming. Thank you for continuing. I raise my hand to Guy, to reaching out to me to participate in this, because it is an important topic that we share today. Heitsiebka, thanking each and every one of you today. Whoa. Heitzka.
Thank you so much, Geraldine Heitzka, and for all your work and service. So by way of my personal introduction, I've worked in the climate trenches for some 25 years. I'm the author of 2 books on the climate solutions, founder of the BC Sustainable Energy Association, and most recently of the federal paper Climate Emergency, a 26-week transition program for Canada, and the provincial paper 50 Ways to Bring More Urgency to BC's Climate Action Plans, which I'll just, those are the 2 books, which shows how long I've been doing this for. The Climate Emergency paper on federal policy and the 50 Ways paper on provincial policy. This launch has revealed the amazing depth of commitment to climate action that exists across the breadth of BC. We've invited representatives from 290 climate action groups, organizations, and initiatives, of which some 175 are represented here today. So just to give you a sense of a quick glance through the groups who are present. And I'm moving quickly here because there's such a wealth of activity of climate action around the province. And then there are the groups that are literally registered within the last day. We know that there are hundreds more environmental and conservation groups in addition to those we invited. Some of the groups here today have paid staff and a long history of activism. Some are small and just beginning. Some are led by climate veterans, some by determined teenagers. Our launch is a venture full of promise, possibility, and potential pitfalls. So please be patient with us as we work this out. We may stumble ourselves. Success in making BC a global leader in tackling the climate and biodiversity emergencies will require both an inside and an outside track. Some will want to meet with John Horgan and his ministers. Others will want to blockade roads to prevent pipeline construction and old growth destruction. We need both types of work. This launch is just the beginning. We hope some of you will join us to share the leadership. And to this end, we scheduled a follow-up meeting in 2 weeks on Saturday, February the 6th at 4 p.m, when we'll dive more deeply into the details of organizing a network that will hopefully serve BC's many climate action groups for years to come, without stepping on other groups' toes or duplicating their work. It's our hope that over the weeks ahead, we'll be able to craft a platform for intergroup cooperation that will enable us to speak with one voice and achieve far more than we can alone. As the African proverb says, if you want to travel fast, go alone. If you want to travel far, go together. Our purpose today is not to think about climate policies and actions or to critique the government for its obsessions with LNG and Site C. It's to think about the kinds of services our network can offer to its many members and the kind of structure that will best serve this purpose, that will be efficient, participatory, democratic, and effective. The secret to success for each of us is that 30 trillion cells and 40 trillion bacteria are cooperating right now to create us. If we can cooperate as well as they do, we'll be able to create a super powerful climate action organism that will have few limits to what it can achieve. I'd like to finish with a plug for the 5th law of sustainability. The first 4 laws are good ecological stuff. The 5th, which I wrote myself, says, if it's not fun, it's not sustainable. And one of the secrets to having fun, I've learned from experience, is to take good care of our relationships with each other as we work together, to be kind to each other, to avoid self-importance, anger, and blame, to nourish each other as we go about this incredibly important work, to build a culture of kindness and respect in all that we do. And to all of you, I say thank you for joining in this effort today. So now to our speakers. Can you unmute yourselves as I introduce you? First, Emma Jane Buryan. Emma Jane is an 18-year-old UVic student who helped organize the Climate Strike Victoria and Climate Strike Canada when she was at school. She's pursuing a double major in political science and environmental science at UVic while working as the UVic Sustainability Project's communications officer. She writes that the biggest thing I've learned is that getting people together, especially youth, is really empowering when we all have this shared vision for what we want to see in the future. Floor is yours, Emma Jane.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm coming to you today from the homelands of the Lekwungen speaking peoples and the Oceanic peoples, also known as Victoria, BC. I'm so grateful in times like this that we can gather together over Zoom and do the important work of collaboration, the important work of coming together with a shared vision within our differences in background and experience, strengthening our message and actions. The importance of meaningful collaboration and solidarity is what I'll briefly speak to you about today. In the environmental movement, we speak constantly about the importance of seeing ourselves as connected to the natural world. Indeed, this is extremely important because it is through seeing each other, living things as less than ourselves that we tend to exploit and destroy our world, which in turn harms us. For many decades, however, the environmental movement across North America has not been practicing what we preach. We have been acting as if we are disconnected from each other. Our white environmentalism has been systemically racist, homophobic, transphobic, and ableist. Yet many of us are quick to defend it and unwilling to own up to these mistakes. The environmental movement around the world and here at home in BC is overwhelmingly white. We cannot truly advocate for sustainability and justice for people and the planet if we are not also being actively anti-racist, if we are not also standing in solidarity with our queer and trans friends when violence is perpetuated against them or microaggressions are being thrown at them. We cannot claim to be pushing for a new system and a new way of being without working to dismantle all of the systems of oppression within our own movements that create toxicity within our society. We must hold each other up and stand in solidarity with our human family. The oppressions perpetuated by white environmentalism must end. It is killing our world and it is making our movement incredibly weak. Our environmentalism must be intersectional. As science tells us, biodiversity on Earth does not act individually, but collectively within an interconnected web of ecosystems. As ecologist Robin Wall-Kimmerer tells us in the book Braiding Sweetgrass, trees act not as individuals, but somehow as a collective. What we see is the power of unity. What happens to one happens to us all. We can strive together, we can starve together, or we can feast together. All flourishing is mutual. This is the lens in which our movement here in BC should be rooted in. So as we come together from our different organizations across the province, I would like us all to reflect on how we personally and how our groups have been complicit when violence is being experienced by marginalized peoples. Secondly, we must make a commitment personally and as a collective to unlearn our colonial belief systems, constantly challenging our perceptions, and work for intersectional environmentalism, recognizing it's an ongoing process that we must nurture and tend to. Together, we can create great waves of change. And firstly, we must ensure this space to do so is safe for everyone to participate in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emma Jane. Our next speaker is Sephora Berman. Sephora has been designing environmental campaigns and working on environmental policy in Canada and beyond for over 20 years. She is, among other things, the International Program Director at Stand.Earth, Chair of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Committee, and co-founder of the Global Gas and Oil Network. In 2019, she received the Climate Breakthrough Project Award, which included $2 million to create breakthrough global strategies on climate change. She was one of the creators and lead negotiators of the Great Bear Rainforest Agreement and the Canadian Boreal Forest Initiative, contributing to the protection of 40 million hectares of old-growth forests. Sephora, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Guy. And it's truly an honor to be here. What an incredible opening. Thank you, Geraldine. And Emma, your words are really inspiring. You know, I have to admit, this morning when I woke up and I looked at my calendar and realized this was on my calendar, I was so weary. I was just so tired, and I thought, really, even on the weekend, you've agreed to things, and sitting here looking at all of your faces, all of the people, over 200 people who have chosen to spend their Saturday afternoon here to create the BC Climate Action Network, and listening to you, Emma, I feel so very honored and inspired. When we're good, when we organize together and network together so that we're greater than the sum of our parts, we lift each other up. We inspire each other to keep going. And I feel that energy today. So I want to thank you so much for that. So what do I want to say at this moment? I guess I want to reinforce what Guy said about the urgency of this moment and what we're doing here today. This week, you know, as Biden was coming into power, signing executive order after executive order, and you know, gave us, you know, some renewed hope, I started thinking about how I felt when Premier Horgan was elected, when Prime Minister Trudeau was elected, after years and years of far-right governments who were denying climate change. And it's like we've gone from climate denial to delusion. You know, their words keep ringing in my head. You know, pipelines will fund our windmills. LNG is a gift to the world and will strengthen our climate plan. No sane government would leave billions of dollars of oil in the ground. Our LNG is the cleanest in the world. The science shows us that the world is on track to produce 120% more fossil fuels, oil, gas, and coal than the world can safely burn. And we know that extreme weather has increased in severity and frequency over 50% in my lifetime. Hundreds of thousands of people are losing their homes and some their lives already due to heat waves and fires and flooding right now as we speak. Today, I checked this morning, the CO2 trapped in our atmosphere, smothering the earth, is at 413 parts per million. And we know we need to get to below 350 parts per million. So as we embark on this new endeavor, I would say, I think we need to all hold that every ton matters. Every ton not emitted at this moment in history saves lives. The science tells us we need dramatic reductions in emissions by all governments, by all industries now. Yet our own governments are expanding fracking and LNG and oil sands, even offshore drilling in Canada. Other governments like Denmark have committed to stop the expansion of oil and gas and wind it down. And our governments, both the BC government under John Horgan and the NDP and the federal Liberals under Trudeau, have been captured by the oil and gas industry to such an extent that at this moment in history, when we know we need to wind down, they're shoveling taxpayers' dollars into oil and gas companies to help them build more fossil fuel infrastructure, distorting markets that would otherwise shut down these projects because the demand for fossil fuels is less and declining faster than anyone predicted. The price of renewables and batteries are dropping, and governments around the world are increasing their climate action to move towards electrification and renewables and shut down fossil fuels and infrastructure. These projects and these companies won't survive unless our governments prop them up, and that's what's happening right now, right underneath our noses. The transition is being made harder every day by our governments who are building more of the problem. 80% of the emissions in our atmosphere come from 3 products: oil, gas, and coal. And those 3 products threaten the stability of life on Earth, and they need to be phased out. That's the bottom line. And in the last 2 years, the NDP government has spent $1 billion giving away our money to fossil fuel companies. This year, the BC government spent twice as much on tax breaks and direct subsidies for fracking companies and LNG as they did on their plan to fight climate change. Yet the polls show Canadians and in BC, people want to prioritize climate action. So that's our job. Our job in the movement, I think, is to make that visible, to organize so that politicians feel that pressure, to propose laws and policies that reflect the urgencies and the emission rates and billions being poured into fossil fuels rather than solutions, show that we're failing at that job. We need to build our movement strength. We need to coordinate better. We need to support each other. And I agree, like in nature, our strength comes from our diversity. I don't have all the answers. Any person that says they do at this moment in history is not really being honest. And I'm here to learn. And I'm really appreciative for the opportunity, because together we can give each other courage to stand strong in the face of incremental policies at this moment in history, courage to demand more, to demand greatness, to build the province that we want. And yeah, together we're going to be greater than the sum of our parts. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sephora. Our next invited guest speaker is Seth Klein. Seth worked for 22 years as the founding British Columbia director of the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. And he is, among other roles, founder and past co-chair of the BC Poverty Reduction Coalition, and a founder and active member of the Metro Vancouver Living Wage for Families campaign. He's author of the recently published book, A Good War, Mobilizing Canada for the Climate Emergency. Seth, the floor is yours.
Well, hello, friends. It's great to be with you. I'm joining you with gratitude from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. I want to start by saying just a huge congrats and thanks to Guy and Heather and all the organizers for launching this initiative. It's much needed. It's lovely to see you all and to see many old friends as I look at the screen. So I think this is what brings us together. BC, in many respects, is actually the high watermark when it comes to climate action in our country. And yet, as we on this call all know, BC does not have a true climate emergency plan. Clean BC actually never uses the terms climate crisis or emergency. And our provincial plan simply doesn't align with what the science and the IPCC says that we must urgently do. And so at every level of government, municipal, provincial, and of course federal, we need to quickly ramp up the level of ambition. And these next few years are going to determine if our kids have a fighting chance. As those of you who've gotten your hands on my book now know or have heard me speak recently, I'm now strongly of the view that climate breakdown requires a new mindset to mobilize all of society and galvanize our politics and to fundamentally remake our economy and to move us out of individualizing the solutions and actually seizing this as a collective task. And here's why that I think we need a new approach. And it's simply this is really the premise of my book and all the talks I give these days. What we have been doing is simply not working. If you look at both Canada's greenhouse gas emissions going back the last 20 years or British Columbia's going back for the last 20 years, what you basically see is a flat line, meaning our emissions are no longer climbing. That's the good news, but neither are they in decline. So despite decades of calls to action and plans and policies and commitments, our emissions are not on a path to stave off a horrific future for our children and future generations. We have run out the clock with distracting debates about incremental changes, but where it matters most, which is actual GHG emissions, we have accomplished precious little. And so here we are, all of us, confronting this harrowing gap between what the science says we must do and what our politics seems prepared to entertain. I structured my whole book around lessons from Canada's World War II experience. And it's not because I get all, weirdly animated about war. is because I see in the history of our wartime experience this helpful and in fact hopeful reminder that we have done this before. We have mobilized in common cause across society to confront an existential threat. And in doing so, we have retooled our entire economy twice, once to ramp up military production, once to reconvert to peacetime in the space of just 6 years. What we did with remarkable speed and scale is amazing. Since releasing my book in September, I'm frequently asked in interviews, so how do you know when a government or a political party gets the emergency, that they really get it, that they are moving into emergency mode? And so in the course of trying to answer that question, I've tried to distill 400 pages, if you will, into what I consider 4 markers of when you know that a government has shifted into emergency mode. And they're this. Number 1, it spends what it takes to win. Number 2, it creates new economic institutions to get the job done. Number 3, it shifts from voluntary and incentive-based policies to mandatory measures with clear near-term dates. And number 4, it tells the truth. It tells the truth about the severity of the crisis that we're facing, communicates a sense of urgency about what we now have to do. And you know, it's striking that during the Second World War, the Canadian government hit all those markers with flying colors. And likewise, in response to the pandemic that we've all been living through, I would say the Trudeau government passes all 4 markers. But with respect to the climate emergency, thus far anyway, our current federal and provincial governments are all failing on all 4 counts. The BC government doesn't hit any of those markers. And in fact, no political party, including the Greens, I would say, yet hits all of the markers. So we've got our work to do, and we should do it together, and we would benefit from more coordination between our efforts, which is why I'm so pleased by this initiative. Just to say a little more, well, I think I'm running out the clock here in terms of the time Guy has given us, but in terms of spending more, we need to do that, not a little more, but by an order of magnitude. We need to create new economic institutions so that we're not just trying to incentivize someone else to do what needs to be done, but doing it ourselves. In the Second World War, we created 28 crown corporations. So far, Justin Trudeau has created 2, one of which is the Trans Mountain Pipeline Corporation. And the BC NDP government in this government, unlike in the 90s and the 70s, has created none. And we're starting to set mandatory dates, but the dates are way far out. They don't align with what we need to do. And we need our governments to tell the truth. Emergencies need to look and sound and feel like emergencies. And if our current leaders believe that we face a climate emergency, they need to act and speak like it's a damn emergency. We need them to name it and speak it continually and rally us at every turn, because that's what you do in a crisis. Thanks.
Thanks, Seth. And this is Seth's book, A Good War, Mobilizing Canada for the Climate Emergency. And if every group represented here set up a miniature book club over 4 weeks and worked through it and understood it, we'd all be, you know, more on the same page. So our next speaker is Natalie Odd. Natalie is the executive director of the Alberta Environment Network, which has 100 organizational members. She's worked in the environmental NGO sector for most of her working life, including previous positions at Green Calgary and the Alberta Eco Trust. Natalie, the floor is yours. Natalie?
Yep, I'm here just trying to unmute. Thank you for letting me join you today, even though I'm in Alberta, which might be the low water mark. As Seth mentioned, you're the high water mark. I was really going to come and lurk in here today and see what you're all doing over in BC. And I'm so impressed with the number of organizations that came out today, as Bora said, on a Saturday. And just want to first thank Guy, Heather, Deb, and Jane for putting this together, and then all the speakers, and Geraldine opening for us, and hearing from Emma, Jane, Zipporah, Seth. I'm madly taking notes from all of you. I wanted to just share a few remarks about what's happening Alberta side. So I'm sure a lot of you know that there are people working on climate in Alberta. We have our own challenges that you may have heard about. And so I want to tell you a little bit about how we are organizing. The Alberta Environmental Network as Guy mentioned, we have about 100 members. We do have a climate caucus. We meet regularly. And for the last 2 years, we were trying to figure out how we could prioritize actions, collaborate, and have the greatest impact possible as a collaborative. And we found it very challenging, even though we were meeting regularly and really wanting to work on different projects, and we did have various campaigns. We found it difficult to prioritize and figure out what to work on. And we were also experiencing, as I'm sure you've heard about, the election of a new government and a war room and being under attack and having to deal with things from different sides, and wondering how we could actively work together as we were feeling under attack. And in the last little while, there's been a pivot and a shift I wanted to share with you. And this came about with the advent of Project Drawdown, which, as I'm sure many of you are familiar with, it provides it's a solution-focused framework. So a lot of research, in-depth research done by hundreds of fellows in Project Drawdown, with Paul Hawken kicking that off. And we've adopted that framework, and we're now organizing around the solutions in Project Drawdown. And it's just a very, very useful method for us to look at all of these solutions and examine them from an Alberta perspective. What is both impactful and feasible in Alberta? What can we throw our weight behind? So we're currently doing research around that. And we will be building campaigns around the most impactful solutions that we have in Alberta. Along with that, we are working with Truth and Reconciliation and Planetary Boundaries, and that's an underpinning of the work that we are doing. Whenever we apply for funding, it is both for our team leads and Indigenous team leads. And I'll just share that we are we've broken out into teams for coordination, strategy, research, communications, campaigns. So we're being very deliberate in how we're organizing. We're being very solutions focused, and we intend to be very cross-sectoral. And the one big change I'd like to mention is that our solutions, when we are gathering information collaboratively, is that we're going to do this on a wiki platform. So it is completely open. Anyone can contribute. Any individual, you don't have to be an environmentalist, an environmental group, you can be in any sector. We are just looking for the best information from any Albertan who would like to provide it, and that is very different from what we have done before. We are coming off the heels of a successful campaign. I'm not sure if you're aware, but the Alberta government was trying to shut down 175 provincial parks, and we organized and mobilized against it, and we're successful in stopping that from happening, which has really lit a fire under a lot of people in Alberta, to show that even in a majority government that has some really extreme plans for our environment, we can in numbers organize and mobilize. We are shifting. We still have issues around parks, but we're shifting to the coal issue, because you probably heard they want to take apart some mountains in the Rockies for coal. And we are going to organize and mobilize continually around parks, around coal, and around climate. But I just wanted to emphasize that we are really looking at Project Drawdown and the solutions within it to organize and mobilize. So that's where we are. And thank you for letting me join you today.
Thank you so much, Natalie. So our final speaker is David Suzuki, our favorite great-grandfather and world changer. More professionally, David is an award-winning geneticist and broadcaster, the host of CBC's The Nature of Things for over 40 years, and the author or co-author of more than 50 books, many of which are for children. He's a companion of the Order of Canada. He has 29 honorary degrees from universities in Canada, the US, and Australia. And for his support of Canada's Indigenous peoples, he's been honored with 8 names, and he's been formally adopted by 2 First Nations. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. What an exciting moment. I congratulate you for calling all these people together, and seeing the number that have come in is very, very exciting. I'm speaking from the traditional unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, the Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish people, who've cared for these lands and waters, as you know, for thousands of years. I'm so glad to see Geraldine here, and to be an opening part of this, because I really believe that it's going to be Indigenous people, their perspective, which is an ecocentric way of seeing the world that we need now. You see, the problem, the crisis is urgent. Thank you, Sephora, for telling us how urgent the crisis is. And thank you, Emma Jane, for the energy that youth is bringing to it. And I think that we need the kind of commitment that Seth has documented in his book. I really think that's a part of the blueprint for how we can really act seriously on what we're facing now. I did the first show on global warming in 1989 on the nature of things. That was a year after we had the Atmosphere Conference in Toronto. And at that conference, the politicians were there, including Brian Mulroney and Gro Harlem Brundtland, ministers from 26 countries. There were representatives from 40 some odd countries. Enviro's there, James Hansen was there, Stephen Lewis was there. That was it. The science was in, the politicians were there, they heard it, and that conference called for a 20% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions in 15 years. If we had done it, we would not have the problem we have today. And so the big question is, what the heck is it going to take to get us to make that kind of commitment that we saw in World War II that we needed in 1988? The nature of things has since done literally dozens of programs in which climate change and the effect on the item that we were covering have been listed. I mean, climate has clearly been affecting the kinds of issues the nature of things does. And I think the fundamental problem is that we have removed ourselves from the natural world. For most of human history, we understood that we were deeply embedded in a very complex web of relationships with all other species, with the air, the water, the soil, and sunlight. And in that web, we received the generosity from Mother Nature, but we accepted a tremendous responsibility to act properly. And I believe for the last 1,000 years or so, we have really removed ourselves from that way of understanding our place. We now think we're at the top of the heap. It's all about us. We call this an anthropocentric way of seeing the world. And we think we're so smart because, we don't have to be constrained by laws of nature. We are so smart, we invent machines that can travel faster than any biological creature. We can live under the oceans. We can live in outer space. We can dream of terraforming Mars so that we can live on. So, there's no limits to this. And our legal, our economic, and our political systems are all based on that sense that it's all about us. So we have to now go and say, well, what about nature? Does nature need any rights? We go to the economists and say, oh, well, why is nature considered an externality? We've got to rediscover the sense that of the web of relationships within which we exist, that Indigenous people for thousands of years have acknowledged and responded with their responsibility to care for. That's what we need. I've seen, we had 9.5 terrible years of Stephen Harper. I had to resign from the board of the David Suzuki Foundation, so he couldn't keep coming after the DSF for our charitable item. I don't mind. I don't have to do all the stuff that the board does now, but I'm free to speak out. But Harper simply dismissed climate change as crazy economics. And so he elevated the economy above the very atmosphere that gives us air to breathe, that gives us weather, climate, and the seasons. And it's this notion that this human construct, the economy, is more important than the atmosphere. What the hell is going on? And this is, I'm so thrilled to see that Natalie is here because, I've wanted to go into Alberta and talk, but people have been saying, I better not go to that province. I'm delighted to know there are people like you and other groups that are working because it's become a very hostile place. It's a very sad thing. The war metaphor is a very useful one because when you're at war, political differences no longer matter. You've got one goal, which is a goal of winning. And we need that. But I realize now, I'm sorry, Guy, I'm going on too long. I'll finish in a second. The problem is even with all of us joining together in this climate group here, and as we must do this right across the country, we're still regarded as a special interest group. Oh, that's Jonathan Wilkinson's gang, you know, and we keep being, and it happens all the time. You got problems with sockeye salmon that are dying out because the water in the Fraser River is getting, oh, that's Department of Fisheries and Oceans. You know, the mountain pine beetle, oh, that's a Minister of Forests. So we can't allow us to be dismissed as just a small special interest group. So we need much more than just us environmentalists. We need people who are involved in hunger and poverty. We need the kind of issues that Emma Jane raised about racism, systemic racism. We need to have people that are interested in aid programs for other countries. This is what we need to become a really powerful force. We've got to break the dam of denial and resistance and release that understanding. This is our existential moment. I like to call ourselves dam busters. That's what we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, David. I now want to pass the hand over to Heather, who will introduce our first breakout group session.
Thank you. And really wonderful to have all of you speakers sharing your thoughts with us today. How inspiring. So we're going to have 2 breakout sessions today, and we'll do those in groups of 4 to 5 people. So the first breakout session, we're going to spend 20 minutes, and we're going to discuss what services the BC Climate Action Network might offer to its members, and what actions we might undertake to increase our shared effectiveness and bring more urgency to BC's climate actions. And we'll have those questions written out for you as we go along. We'll suggest that if one person in each group could just volunteer to facilitate, then that person can take on the role of managing time, just make sure everybody in the group has a fair chance to speak. And then I'll broadcast a message to all of the breakout rooms to let you know when there are 10 minutes left, and again, when there are 5 minutes left, and then you'll get a 60-second warning before the breakout groups close. So we want to capture the key points from all of the different discussions that happen. And I'm going to hand it over to Deb, and she's going to explain how we're going to use Jamboards and give you a little tour of that technology.
All right, welcome everyone. So a network like this needs collaborative tools. We're dispersed in space, we're dispersed in organizations, and we need collaborative tools to be able to work together. So one of the things that we're going to use today is Jamboard. And I am just going to make sure that that is sharing properly. Yep. Okay, so can everybody see an introduction to Jamboard slide in front of them? Great, thank you. And I will come back to this, but I'm going to just demonstrate a couple quick things on Jamboard itself. As I do that, I want you to play, because we know I'm a learning scientist and we know that we learn by doing. So there is the Jamboard. Don't feel as we go and play in this that if it's too technologically difficult for you, that's okay. Because when we put you into small groups, you're going to have plenty of support, because there's definitely going to be somebody in that small group who likes the tech and plays with it. Okay, so that person can be your note taker if you want that to be. But as you open this up and go in, I can see there's 29 plus people in there. I can see people are starting to play around and put stickies, and you'll note that as the stickies come in, there you go, you got to move them around because they tend to drop in one spot and sit over top each other. So the little stickies are over here. You can pull up a sticky, type your name. I'm here on Pender Island. And then when you, and I like mine in green. And so then you hit save and it just pops it in there. And there's Deb on Pender Island. Okay. Oh, look, somebody's changing our background. Okay. So try not to totally reorganize my Jamboard right now. And so that's what you're going to do. I also put a note down here, if you can find the second slide, you're going to have to navigate from one slide to another because there are a lot of us on this call. And when we break you into breakout groups, you're going to have your own slide in the Jamboard that you're going to be working in. So to do that, you're going to click up at the top here and you'll be able to move from one slide to the other. Okay. When you're in the Jamboards, there are multiple Jamboards. That appears to have moved on me. There we go. There are multiple Jamboards, and we'll get to that in a second to be able to get you out to the right one. At the top, it'll be like if you're in group 15 and you're in your Jamboard for groups 10 to 19, 15 will be at Jamboard 5 probably. And if you go there, you'll be able to see whichever group it is. So I'm okay. So the number of your group will be at the top. To figure out which group you're in is when Heather clicks us into groups, it'll say join group and it'll give you a number. So just look for that number and it'll appear at the top of your screen. Okay. Don't worry if you're not in the right Jamboard. If it sounds too confusing for you, just let somebody in your room help like figure it out. And if you just all are in one Jamboard and overlapping each other, that's okay too. The goal here is really just to give us space to be able to note take and document so we can synthesize your thinking for the meeting in 2 weeks. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go back over here and you can close that Jamboard. That was the demo one. You could break that one all you like. So what we're going to do for our first question is, oh, and Heather, can you drop the link? Do you have the link for the slides? And so that,
yeah, I will find that and add it into the chat.
Thank you. So Heather will put a link in the chat that'll get you to this slide presentation, and then you can go down and just click on the links. We actually have all of the links for the slides themselves, or for the Jamboards themselves too, actually. Let me just grab that because that's an easy grab. So these are your questions and the Jamboard links that you will need. And so as soon as Heather breaks this out into groups, you're going to want to figure out which group you're in and go into that Jamboard. Okay. And that is our first thing. I'll give it back to Heather.
Okay, so I have put the link to the slides into the chat. So if anyone hasn't done it yet, what you can do is just click the link to find those slides. And then as you go into the slides, you'll be able to click the link for these different Jamboard group numbers. And that's how you'll get into your Jamboard, because you obviously can't do it through a shared screen.
Heather, I also put the Jamboard links directly into the chat as well.
Perfect. Okay, so the Jamboard links are also directly in the chat. You can get them there as well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open the rooms, and you can just click to accept to join into the room number that you're assigned, and we'll see everyone back in 20 minutes.
And tuning ourselves to listen to different audiences, and not audiences, I think I would get wildly away from that language. Communities, like really human to human relationships, that relationality, building those relationships, working in sustained relationships. And just the idea that ramping up action requires us to work across a lot of different communities and sectors and thinking about how to do that. So there are some different ideas in some of these Jamboards, which are deeply fascinating. So what we promise to do as part of our commitment to this work is we promise to take some time in the next 2 weeks, go through all of these Jamboards. You actually have access to these too, so you can go in and look. Please don't delete anything. I probably will start to like turn editing capability off. We don't want to like lose any thinking on this accidentally. But please feel free to add for the next, like until the end of the weekend, say, add thinking as it sort of percolates to you. And then you can go ahead and look at all of them and feel free to just synthesize your own thinking. All right, I'm going to leave that there.
Great.
Okay, so we're going to go into the second breakout session, and we're going to use the same breakout groups as before. So you should be seeing the same people that were in your group last time. And a few people have had to drop off of the meeting, but it looks like all of the groups right now will have at least 3 people in them. So this time we're going to focus the discussion on the question of what kind of structure, governance, and representation we should adopt. We're going to take 15 minutes for this discussion. And some points you might want to consider would be things like whether we should form a registered nonprofit society, if groups or individuals would get seats, and how might we allocate seats to ensure representation. So again, I'm going to broadcast a message when there are 10 minutes left, and again, when there's 5 minutes left.
And Heather, before you hit the button, I have one other thing. Okay.
Yes, the links. We need the Jamboard links for this one. Is a new Jamboard, right?
Yeah.
And
so if everybody can make sure that they close their previous Jamboard so you don't get confused between the different questions, that will be helpful logistically. And then also I'll put the Jamboard and the question into the chat window. And also, as you're moving out into groups and you're sharing, you're thinking, do try to make sure that at least one person in your group is note taking. If you're having any trouble with that, feel free to just take notes and shoot Guy an email, and we'll synthesize it in the aftermath. Like, don't let the technology stand in your way. All right.
yeah, Deb, before you go, did Marianne Paré join us? Did you?
I'll check on where she's at. I'll check while we're in.
Yes, she is on.
There she
There you
is.
are. Good to know that. Okay, we're already waiting. Okay. Heather, back to you.
Okay, so on that note, I'm going to reopen the breakout rooms, and we'll see everybody back in 15 minutes.
They are thinking about leaning into different working groups or different shares, that people can actually name what might be helpful in that area, like what kind of working groups might be helpful, because that would help us a lot to be able to really figure out how to structure things and offer up some possibilities in our synthesis in 2 weeks. All right, so I'm going to pause there and stop my share. And I'm going to need a minute before launching the final survey, just to be.
Yeah, so let me just, in the meeting in 2 weeks' time, and I will resend an invitation to everyone. It is for those who are interested in stepping forward into leadership roles. And if 206 people step forward, that's amazing and wonderful headache to have. So bear that in mind. So if we want heavy lifters, people who will actually do some lifting work, take on roles, make this thing happen. I think it's clear we don't want a charity because we want to be political, we want to be open, we don't want to be limited by that. We will need the ability to raise some funds because this gets complicated pretty quickly. And Heather, myself, and Deb have done this entirely voluntarily as individuals with no organization backing us. We're just doing it, stepping up because it needs doing because of the climate urgency. But we're going to need at least a part-time manager, director to help hold things together. And we can either appeal to a foundation to help with that, or we can just put up a GoFundMe and see if people can chip in enough to help someone have that job. But then we need a board of directors or some group that can choose who's the best person for that job. I've gotten in trouble before with organizations by not having a rigorous enough board that chooses the person and choosing someone who's not good for a job, and that can get you into anyone who's been on anyone with a big organization knows all these problems that come up, right? And then to keep the whole thing, the other thing that came up in my group is how do we, the Rotary clubs, they've kept going for 100 years, but every group follows the same rules. Every group here has got its own rules, its own culture, its own identity, and that's exactly how we want it to be. And yet we need to weave ourselves together so that we can all pull together when we need to.
So one thing I'm just seeing in the chat here is that folks are really keen to have a contact list. People are sharing their emails in the chat, which is wonderful, and that's going to be saved and people can be redirected to it. It sounds like there'd be probably interest in having an option for people to opt into having their email address be shared with one another. We're not going to share everybody's email addresses from the registration because we don't have everyone's permission to do that. But that sounds like something that would be probably important for us to look at as the next steps would be some kind of a venue or platform for people to voluntarily share email addresses with each other.
So right now we have Electric Embers, which everyone's email is on that. So when I send out the list that comes, it comes out as BC Can. But we made it one way so that everyone can't post to it. Otherwise we'd be drowning in emails from everyone. And that's the last thing all of us want. So until we work out a structure, we'll keep it one way. If we'll be sharing feedback you give to us as a group, so I've been sitting on 30 emails that have come in during this session. Deb, you ready for the survey thing yet?
Yes, I am. And I actually added that question that just came into it, the joys of having iterative conversations while we're going on here. Okay, so we're going to give you a quick survey. We want you to just stay while you do the survey. Just take a moment since you have this scheduled into your time block, and just take the survey, ask us questions in the chat if you're having any, oops, sorry, is that right? Did that
So
open
the
the floor?
survey's in the chat box, right?
Yeah, can everybody access that survey?
Hang on, I got 80 new messages. You're right, you have to go right to the bottom. I don't see it yet.
Here, I'll put it up on the screen too. Just give me 1 second.
Because there are so many other people sending in messages in the chat box.
Yeah, I don't think it came through, Deb. The
No.
link.
Give me 1 second.
It did come through, but it's now just a number of messages up.
Oh, okay.
And everyone else,
I saw it too,
stop chattering and let Deb do it again. So there's the
Just for a
last
minute.
thing.
Okay, I'm going to just link it to the last slide also. And
The last
here-
image in the chat box for
so
all of us.
just
There we are.
give me a sec.
No one else is allowed to chat at all for 5 seconds. Click on the docs.google.com forms. I'm
Is
doing
that
that.
it? Did that work?
It's worked for me.
Yes.
Good, thank you. And
Exit,
I added it to the slides at the last slide if people had the slides open.
So someone's just asked me in the chat, who should fill out this survey? Are you going to talk a bit about that, Deb?
Yeah, so at the moment, what we would like is any of you who are on this call, we would like you just to go ahead. I put a space for your name and your organization separately. So don't worry if you're having multiple people from organizations. It might also be helpful for you to spread it out to your organizations, because while we had a limit on who could be here today, it may not be you who's the person who will connect longer term or who might want to take on a leadership role in this effort. So I do encourage you to take the link that is in the slide deck we created and shared, and we'll send this out in a follow-up email to all of you as well. But really to have the survey go out to your broader networks would be helpful. We do need replies to the survey in the next week, like before next Friday, because we need to be able to synthesize it before we come back.
Deb, the final question simply says possible roles or working groups, and it's got option 1.
Oops, sorry.
With no other detail.
Bummer about that. Because now that you've opened the survey, sorry, that should have had an open choice, but if you've opened the survey, I don't think it will change it.
Okay. Well, option 1 means, yeah, well, we'll sort that out later.
Just put it in the other things to share. And the question on other things to share, just add the roles in there. Sorry.
And Deb, can we just clarify where you've asked people if they want their information shared in a directory? Are you thinking a public directory or a directory that everyone in this network could access?
Here right now. And then that's not that we're going to create one at this moment. That's just to know if there's an interest in it.
So right now we do have a Google Sheet with every organization and its website as a public thing, because by definition, if you have a website, you're agreed to be public. We have not made anyone's emails public, because that's personal, and we do not want any scam person getting on and grabbing all those lists. So
yeah, and I discourage that generally.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
Could you repeat what you were saying about roles? This is one of the problems. There's a lot going on, and the instructions seem to be repeated twice for somebody like me. So what?
Absolutely. So if we can all just, I'll just go through it one more time. So on the survey, because at the last question, it just got like, I somehow didn't get the right form of thing in there. The 2 questions up where it says other things you wish to share, you can add in that question any roles that you suggest that we have. Like, do we need a chair? Do we need working groups of any kind? Any of those things that you haven't already captured on the Jamboard. If you've been sort of percolating on them, please feel free to put some detail on that.
That has to be in the...
Just one second, guys. If you specifically want to do a leadership role, there's just a yes, no, maybe question. And it's not a commitment. It's just to know that we would reach out to you specifically. Okay,
and leadership role could be on any small part of it, like leadership for Instagram, leadership for sort of, marketing, leadership for electric vehicles, could be any kind of leadership role. It doesn't have to be necessarily board level. We're going to lead, 20, 30 leadership role people, I think, in this network. And there's not space for that detail on the actual Google form. So maybe put that into the chat box.
I'll save the chat and synthesize
Yeah, the chat all gets recorded anyway.
And so we're asking, I believe we're asking people to take a few minutes now and fill in that form if you can.
Let's pause. I feel like we should have some good tunes for you. But
Well,
I have to do that.
we're all recording this, so Heather's a really good singer, so I'm going to put her on the spot and ask her to sing just like that.
Right.
I did have the
Quiet
thought.
space for a second.
I was, while people are doing that, there was amazing Mexican music on last night. I was thinking at the end of a meeting like this, if we were in a community hall, we all get up and have a really good dance.
I do have a comment. At the end of your survey, it says, never submit passwords through Google Forms. Yet your first question, never submit passwords. So
Yes,
you can submit your email, but not passwords.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, I never suggest, passwords, never send them in the same thing. I usually send one by a text and one by email or one by,
Yeah. For some reason, I read that emails, but that is not what it is. Thank you.
By the way, it's really lovely to see you, Riza.
Yeah, hi.
Oh, improvised music. We'll change the world together.
I have a question about the last question on the survey.
Yep.
It just gives option 1 and it doesn't even say
Yeah,
what the option
that was the one that we mentioned, that there's just an error on the question. So can you answer that question in the question 2 questions up where it says other things you wish to share?
Scroll back up. I've closed mine, so it's too late for me.
Yeah, that was an error. Sorry about that. Lots of different things going on today.
And I made an error at the very beginning of this. I didn't press record until we were about 2 minutes in, which is so when the video goes up, I'll have to have some way to cover for that little omission. Okay, how can we tell how many forms are complete and how many people are done?
I have it on my end. So we have 115 complete.
We've got 191 participants.
So we'll let folks just keep that open and we can wrap up a little bit.
Because we're going into breakout groups for the one final time. Can it still be open when we're in breakout groups?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Heather, back to you.
Yes, so we're just going to reopen those same breakout rooms that we were in just for a couple of minutes. And that way we allow folks to just share any closing thoughts if you want to, have somebody add something into your Jamboard or whatnot. And any final thoughts that people would like to share with each other before we come back for a closing poem together.
And it's also, if you've got to know each other and like each other, just, hey, friendships build up in breakout groups. It's a Zoom thing.
Yes. Or Guy, I think you were going to explain, have you already explained everything about the next steps that you wanted to explain?
I have explained. I will circulate through our BCCAN an invitation to the follow-up meeting with the link. We got 4 people registered already for that meeting. I'll do that all by email. Yep.
Okay, wonderful. All right, and I will reopen those same breakout rooms for something like 3 or 4 minutes.
There
you are.
Can you hear me?
You.
Excellent.
Yes.
Okay. Well, actually, right now, I really wish I could play Mexican music because I love Guy's idea of ending that way. And yes, so this is a spoken word I'd love to share with all of you. It was inspired by the youth actions in the streets 2 Septembers ago now. And I'm sending it out to all of you. I've just been absolutely gobsmacked by listening to you all today. I'm thrilled to be in your company. And I think the work that all of you are doing is, the critical work of this whole planet and its whole history. So this is, I send this out to you, and I'm going to suggest at 6 o'clock or something now, just close your eyes. You can make your own visuals for this. It's going to just be voice. It's called Mother. Suppose you had a mother that raised you into life. Nurture, comfort, safety, caring as you grew. This mother gave you beauty, gave you wonder, gave you joy. Suppose you had a bottle that held a dose of poison, and you started slipping poison into your mother's milk. Suppose each dose was stronger and you gave it every day, and your mother's body weakened each day a little more. Her skin began to dry and crack, her hair to thin, breath to bitter, limbs to ache, guts to fail. And then her heart began to break. Your mother's dying. We are poisoning our mother. Her skin, the earth, is fracked and cracking. Her breath, the air thick and choking. Her hair, the forests, shorn and fallen. Her blood, the rivers, womb, the ocean, festering and fouled. Her myriad of creatures are dying every day. We are poisoning our mother. We need a remedy to salve our mother's ills, an antidote to bring her back to life. Let's gather the ingredients, take soil that's dark and loamy, add feathers, scales, and fur. Apply the fierceness of talons, the tenderness of ferns. Mix in the salted tears of sorrow, the bitter rage against the greedy ones, the sweetness of all children's hopes and dreams. The power of this potion is human beings connecting, awakening, uniting in our loving of the mother. We'll mix our potion every day, apply it where we find her wounds and feel her pain. Each day we'll ask, how can we help the healing? Each day we'll act great and small deeds to soothe the body of our mother. There can never be too many cooks in the mixing of this brew. We'll draw down sun and rain, stir in the songs of birds, the howls of beasts, the cries for freedom. This potion is the magic of human race arising, uniting and acting in our loving of the earth. We'll be so busy healing that the hate will be forgotten, our caring be so potent as to raise the clouds of doom. Together, we will watch the sun arising on her body, the whole and healing body of our loved and loving mother. Together, we'll give back the caring she has given. Together, we'll return our mother into life.
Thank you, Marianne. And I gather that there's a call for us to be able to share your words. If you can email your text of your poetry to Deborah or myself, we'll send it all out to you. Yeah. We've come to the end of our session. Thank you to everyone. Haichka, strength, love. Next steps happen during our meeting in 2 weeks' time. This same time in 2 weeks, for those who want to assume a leadership role when we dig in and make this thing happen. Heather, any closing thoughts? Deborah?
Just lots of gratitude for everybody who made time for this today and who is making time for our beautiful mother in your lives and your work.
And I'd like to also just personally thank Marianne. She's from my home island here. And I really appreciate her being here, and Geraldine as well. Thank you so much for her work today in starting us off right. So thank you all for coming. And I do hear the calls in the chat, so we'll circulate a few ideas after this with our follow-up email. Thank you all. Haishka.
So you all, if you're on gallery form, under reactions, you can click a heart or a smile. I'm going to, if you all put a reaction up, I'm going to do a screen grab of that and see what I get. Yay, way to go, I got it. Thank you, everyone. We're done for today. We will carry on braiding the sweetgrass together. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You'll never.
Thank you.
Engage.